Okay, let me try this one more time. We're trying to spruce up the studio and get everything going. And the cameras are still needing to be readjusted. Let's see. I think that gives a good show, and we don't have the light in the way. Let's see if that'll do it there. Okay, so welcome back, everybody. Today's the final show of 2025. And this, as you can tell, has really been a dry run as we've run through the different concepts, build up what we're building for 2026. Let's see if I can adjust this just a little bit more here. And then hopefully make it stay for the year. I don't know how that's going to work. It looks like it's still too low. Let's do one more adjustment there. Okay, let's see if this will work here. So what we want to do is really focus in this final session on wiping everything out and starting over. This is an opportunity to get real, to really understand what we have faced. This is the close of 2025. Now, for people like you and I, we can remember when it turned 1980, when the 1990s rolled around, heck, when we got to 2012 and then we thought the whole world was going to end. And yet for so many, the 1900s could have been the dark ages. And so part of what we're going to be talking about tomorrow as we run forward are all the successes in technology that we've had over this period of time. But today I want to roll back a little bit and talk about the reality of what we have faced. And it's been harsh. And in talking about this, I pulled this out. Now, any of you out there, it's really dusty and dirty. In fact, it moved out of the main house into a separate area that I have. And it's just really commentary of where we've been, what we've been fighting. Well, it's time to get that dusted off, to get our lives back, and to start moving forward. And it really isn't going to be because of Congress or the president. The change is going to start with you. And we saw this very strong with Nick Shirley's video this week. And all the independent news journalists that have been on the road, on their feet, shining the light on everything that's been happening, specifically over these last 5 years. And can you believe it's been 5 years? So let me go ahead and start over here and open this up a little bit. I wanted to start again. Tonight is New Year's. All around the planet will be celebrating this absolutely joyous day. And yet, look at the header here. If we can get back to New Year's Eve's events canceled around the world as urgent warning issued. And the full list is apparently included. We're not going to go through that, but really, can't we have any fun? Here from NBC, fireworks and fragile truces. The world closes out the year and rings in 2026. So, of course, we can watch around the world as cities prepare and then celebrate. But I took a spin around ChatGPT and I asked, what are the highlights of 2020 to 2026? And here's the clear high-level timeline of major global highlights of 2020 to 2026, quoting directly here from ChatGPT. So highlights by year: 2020, lockdowns. It reshaped daily life, worldwide lockdowns, remote schedule and work. It also shifted how we viewed one another in society. During that period, I lost all my friends. Major global focus on public health and science, but was it really? And widespread justice movements in many countries. Now, I wanted to talk about this for just a second. Are we really living in a world of more justice right now? What about justice around the world? We saw a mass migration of individuals that are uprooted from all that they knew, from their homeland, in the promise of a better life. The journey was rough for many, some, as Monkey Work showed, just got flown over the border, first class ticket to military bases and dispersed throughout our country. And yet, where does it leave us today? Individuals are in schools, young kids that are crying because they don't know what day their family's going to get picked up and sent home. They're terrorizing their own children. Many of them are coming here just to have children as an anchor baby. And this is why the last few days I made a distinguishing comment between you, the person in your chair, and they and I, and how that all runs together for all of us. Unfortunately, through the 2020s, we found a distinction of people. It didn't bring people together. It wasn't about a melting pot. It was about that replacement that we've heard about for so long, but everybody joked about. But at this point, it was on such a mass scale, nobody could deny it. Now, what did that mean for me? After living in Silicon Valley and really wanting to work for core businesses, the tech companies, I finally got my opportunity. And this was, it doesn't say on there, this was a Google badge. I don't know if you can see that there. And then let's see if the other one's here. In order to manage and work on autonomous vehicles, we had to have a special DMV license that was issued. And that's kind of hard to see as well. And then this is my tag at my dream company where I was finally at. Now, along that pathway, and then here's where I ended up to try to find somewhere to work while we couldn't go to an office. I needed some kind of a remote job. You know, I had strived for my entire career to make sure that I landed in a place that I was passionate about. Technology has always been my focus as a pioneer in any field I've been. It's very interesting. We go through different cycles in our lives, and I realized pretty young that whenever somebody has a new program or they're pioneering a program, that's usually where I end up. Now, that means that the first run through often has more bumps than any others, and some of them fail. They never do a second or a third. But somehow I have a keen ear to understand what is being launched and how to get involved. And I owe that to my mother. But some people never get the pioneering opportunities. They might hear about something way after the fact. And for me, I was determined to work for the top companies on the planet. So Google and Apple afforded me those opportunities, and I'm very, very grateful for that. Now, because of lockdowns, I all of a sudden was starting over again to build my entire career for the second time and start over. And I'll talk about the first time here in a few minutes. So 2020 brought on all of these changes for us. And yet, is it something that helped any of us? What about those of us who didn't migrate, weren't part in the mass migration? Well, like me, many of my peers lost their jobs. And in order to help us out, California passed a number of state bills, SBs, that made sure nobody would hire Californians. We couldn't work as contractors, and nobody would dare hire anybody in the state because of our labor laws. Now, the secret is the companies knew they didn't have to, the big companies at least knew that they didn't have to abide by any of the labor laws. There was no enforcement. There was no government going to work. As an example, when I flew back to Washington, D.C. in the spring of this year, I walked up and down the streets trying to meet individuals and get movement on some items, specifically at the SBA, Small Business Administration, and Department of Labor, amongst door by door in the Capitol building, which is very interesting. If you've never done that, it's a treat to go door by door and meet the congressmen and women in person. And on the floor of Congress to hear what is discussed. and to see what we see on TV from another perspective. And then, of course, the tour of the White House, the absolute respect for this nation that was built and given to us. And yet, what have we done with it? We've been so kind that we've moved over. We've allowed ourselves to be replaced while we continue to fund the rest of the world and unfortunately entertain one war after another. That's not the pathway that lines up with my integrity. And I believe it probably isn't your integrity either. But as we move through 2020, we saw families being ripped apart. We saw friends not talking anymore. How dare you leave your house without a mask covering your face? Even though that whole concept is ridiculous and people knew it was ridiculous. As I went down to the Santa Clara County Health and Human Services offices and asked for clarity, I wanted a document that said, yes, you have to wear a mask, or yes, the business has to be closed, or yes, we're on. And they informed me that it was closed for a period of 3 months around April of 2020. That emergency expired and they never renewed it. And this is according to Dr. Cody's office. When you go to the source and you see the manipulation, Dr. Cody, meanwhile, was shutting down small businesses. If you didn't play with the politics, you didn't get to go back to your restaurant. Walmart and Home Depot didn't close because it was safe to go to a big box store. Costco was open. But how dare you go into a water shop to get some fresh water? Or walk down your street to look at the beach. $1,000 fines for that. So 2020 did not help with widespread social justice movements that resulted in anything positive. It resulted in mostly peaceful protest. Where did that get us? You know, we don't really see on the news the lives and families that were torn apart because of that. The injuries, the long-term trauma. 2020s did a lot of psychological damage. Now, if we move into 2021, let me share that one here. Oops, here we go. So 2021, COVID vaccines. There we go. We had the solution we were looking for. Now we could be free. Tokyo 2020 Olympics. They were finally held because they had been delayed and only allowed with limited audiences. Big growth in online learning, streaming, and digital communities. You know, this year I had an opportunity to meet with I believe it was the COO in charge of Zoom. And I asked him, because I've been looking for this individual to understand how they surge ahead. If you might remember, pre-2020, we had Google Meet. We had Skype. Almost everybody had a Skype account. And that was really made big when Oprah started using Skype. I don't know, was that 15 years ago? 20 years ago now? And yet, how is Zoom, a company that very few of us had ever heard of, they zoomed ahead in every market. And it was really fascinating to hear how they did it. They listened to what was needed. They made it basically free. And they made it just a very simple process that anybody could click on and set up. Now, as you might see from the earlier videos, I didn't do lives. I did them all on Zoom pre-recorded. And then we went ahead and uploaded them. And let me tell you, it's a much easier process. But Zoom really became the saving grace. That's how you could see your friends or family. That's how you connect with the world. And it's very interesting that Zoom took that at a level of respect and surged forward with that. Now, you might remember policies changed once the world opened up and it became more difficult to use Zoom. But the ease of use was there. So in 2021, we were starting to make like it didn't quite happen. But in Santa Clara County, we were still fighting it. In 2022, Russia and Ukraine war began. Doesn't it seem like more than 3 years ago? That just seems crazy. Affecting global politics and energy. And remember the ridiculousness of, first we had the BLM posters in front of people's yards and flags in front of people's yards. And then we went to the Ukrainian flag. Now, if you're from the Ukraine and you've got family there, then fly your flag. Have fun. Ask for help. But the problem is nobody could even point out where Ukraine was on the map. They didn't know anything about the truth of the geopolitics. But you were bad if you weren't supporting that war. At what point are we good for supporting any war? And where has that war gotten us? Now, I don't know if I believe the numbers out there or not, but even one death is too many. They say it could be in the millions. Those are somebody's husbands, fathers, sons, daughters. For what? For what? So in 2022, FIFA World Cup was held in Qatar. And as a side note, remember, Tucker Carlson talked about Qatar. Rapid rise of AI tools became public and widely used. This was a turning point where we were warned that AI was going to take our jobs. And as you've seen, we have a session tomorrow that comes up that really talks about how to survive AI, to take control of it and use it as human-centered leadership, or human-centric, or human in the loop. There's a variety of terms for that. So what about 2023? AI and technology continue to accelerate in the schools. Kids don't even have to learn anymore. All they do is copy and paste into AI. And quite honestly, many of them already set up keystrokes, prompts, so it'll do it for them. In fact, they're told they have to use tools like Grammarly that auto spells and auto corrects and even rearranges paragraphs. And AI and technology started coming out with image transformation. Now we know that the military has had this for a long time, as we talked about it during the elections. And what happened with the years before that? We've seen the manipulation. It goes back to believe in nothing what you see and part of what you hear, or believe nothing of what you hear and part of what you've seen. What is real in this world? With AI, we don't know anymore. Climate events, heat waves, and floods started to increase globally. And space exploration milestones, new missions, telescopes, private space flight. And the question again, did man ever go to the moon? 2024, we had the Paris Summer Olympics. We're free and clear. Well, except for here, we were still having challenges. Major elections in several countries. They were free and open to have elections again. And continued advances in AI, clean energy, and electric vehicles. Also, the autonomous vehicles became more popular. The key players are starting to sort out. What about 2025? AI is more integrated into everyday tools and education. In fact, this is really what we're going to focus on in 2026, making sure that you have the tools and the resources that you need in order to build your solopreneur or startup or small business or large business. Everything is there at your fingertips. Expanded use of renewable energy and climate tech. That story about climate change, it's getting challenged too. Space missions aiming toward the moon and Mars are being prepared. We now have a date, I believe it's 2030, to be back on the moon and creating a a launch pad to get all the way to Mars. What are we looking forward to in 2026? The FIFA World Cup 2026, USA, Canada, and Mexico. LA is really preparing. Continued growth of immersive tech and AR and VR, and stronger global focus on sustainability and future tech. So that's where we're at. Let's go ahead and look at where you and I may be at. Post-traumatic stress disorder in the workplace, supporting employees with PTSD. This is massive. The concept of mental health really wove in during the last 5 years. Now, of course, we've all had it. You've had, what are they, EAP type plans and ways to reach out for assistance at work if needed. But if you're targeted at work, there's no one to help you. In fact, if you mention it, you're a threat to the company. You must be disposed of. PTSD is very serious in the work environment. Many of us go through it while we're still working. And many of us, unfortunately, suffer even more when all of a sudden we're out on our own. If this resonates with you, I'd suggest you to look a little bit deeper into this. It's real. There's some depth. And the manipulation and codependency at work affects way too many people. But we're building something greater. So what I did is I asked about, the stress levels that we're at. Why are our stress levels so high? And this is ChatGPT once again. A summary of the global level of fraud exposure and losses from 2020 through 2025 and estimated 2026 based on reported government data. So let me share this again so you can see this. Global fraud and fraud losses, key trends 2020 to 2026. So 2020 to 2021, early digital shift. E-commerce and digital transactions surged, driving growth in digital fraud and online scams. During this period of time, somehow, when you lose your job, you can't be naive enough to think you're not a target. In this case, it was considered a layoff. But then why was I locked out of bank accounts? Why all of a sudden was I locked out of, everything? They squeeze you in so many directions, and we're going to see that in a minute with PayPal. 1 in 5 global e-commerce consumers experienced online shopping fraud by 2020. And I asked for the resources to be posted here. Global economic crime, including fraud, was already considered widespread, with many organizations reporting multiple incidents in the prior 2 years. Now, as we saw, many businesses had to close because they were robbed so many times. And many businesses just jacked up the prices to make you pay for it. 2022, 2023, rising financial losses. 2023, over $10 billion reported lost to fraud in the United States. That was 2023. That's a 14% increase over 2024. How much was it in 2022? TransUnion data showed suspected digital fraud rates globally increasing 5% of transactions in 2023, up from years earlier. While volume of suspected digital fraud grew faster than transaction growth. Note we also saw people losing their homes to fraud. Showing up one day and realizing that somebody else lived in their home, that they had slept in the bed the night before, but somehow they'd changed the title and now it belonged to them. Crypto-related fraud increased $5.6 billion in 2023, which was a 45% increase from 2022. What did we face in 2024? Major loss increases. What did I ask for here? Global level of fraud. 2024, Consumers reported 12.5 billion lost to fraud. Again, my bank accounts were seized. Finally, last week, I got into a Robinhood account that I've been fighting with them for almost 2 years to get access to. And I was explaining to them that it was their security protocols. And as soon as they updated their security protocols, the system would automatically let me in. But as long as they purposely had it with the workflow they were using, it was blocking out, I guarantee, tens of thousands of people. But when you call and you ask for help, there's no number. When you chat with them, it's just generic. They run you in loops and waste your time. Again, don't be naive. I saw this at Intuit. They would purposely change the protocol to get into accounts in order to separate the accountants from the small businesses they were supporting. What happens when a business separates you from your bank? It's not by accident. So I found that Robinhood was having a meeting at a restaurant that I was meeting with a board of directors. And I quietly went over with a note. And I said, I know this isn't the most appropriate time. Here's my contact information. Please give this to somebody in the executive office. I would like access to my account that I've had since the first month that company started. And finally, I got somebody at a higher level who continued to run me in loops. All my funds are now being moved out of that company. And I suggest if you don't have a location to go to for a company, that's not where you want to put your money. So as we continue here, FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center reported at least 16 billion in global crime. Global identity fraud rates doubled from 2021 to 2024. Showing increasing exposure to digital. Really? Is AI good for us? Is putting everything on the cloud good for us? 2025, business and systematic impacts. So 2025, we have TransUnion. Business globally lost about 7.7% of annual revenue to fraud, an estimated $534 billion in losses. $534 billion in losses. U.S. companies reported an average of 9.8% loss related to revenue. So even if you were running a business, it was still 10% loss due to revenue, 46% more than the prior year survey. I'm not sure how that math runs. First-party fraud committed by customers misrepresenting information, becoming a leading type of fraud globally. They lied about who they were in order to get something. 36% of fraud attacks reported in LexisNexis global data. LexisNexis tracks everything about you. A search in LexisNexis shows a spiderweb connection of everybody you've ever come in contact with, everywhere you've been. And that's been tracking you for more than 30 years. You can just imagine the pinpoint accuracy today. We don't have any freedom. We don't have any privacy. I don't know what rights we still have. But all those individuals who were trafficked into this country, they had rights. They don't have to go home. They're protected by the Constitution. They can have free health insurance, free housing, free education, free university, free cell phones, free food, free support for their unborn and born children, Social Security that they've never paid into. And so you wonder why the quality of life for the majority of us has slipped aside. Actually, we don't wonder why. But that explains the PTSD that we're all facing. What are we looking at 2026? Well, we don't have any definitive global 2026 loss figures yet because we're in December 31st of 2025. So we don't have it. But we do expect continued growth in digital fraud losses, especially online scams, identity fraud, ATO, synthetic identity, and investment fraud. Now, one of the things I'm going to show you is how to create your own clone online. And I highly suggest when you create your clone, you have some mark on it to make sure that it's distinguished easily from who you are and your clone. And you'll see why as we get there. Increasing use of AI by fraudsters, deep fakes, synthetic identities, and automated tasks. There's a number of off-the-shelf tools that all you do is click on the screen, show it where to go, and then instantly it'll continue to scrape data for you or do repetitive. It's usually used for data grabbing. So we'll discuss that as well. Increasing use of AI by fraudsters. Again, higher total fraud cost burdens on businesses and consumers. So if you're not going to walk in and have a 5-finger discount, you're actually going to pay for something like most of the world. You're going to pay significantly more for that. Not only for the item because the person before you stole it and now you have to pay for theirs and for yours, but the taxes are going to go up too. Forecast projections by industry analysts. Nielsen report projections on card fraud losses suggest card fraud losses continuing to rise incrementally through 2026, but not necessarily explosively. Now, for any of you who watch Congress, you'll see the recent congressional hearings with, I believe it was Josh Hawley and Visa and MasterCard, where one of the two stated that their ROI is about 50%. The other one, they said slightly higher, about 50%. They also said that they negotiate percentages differently based on the size of business. So remember, during COVID, Walmart, Home Depot, Costco didn't have to shut down. But you know what else? That small business that was struggling just to have a right to open their door also has to pay a higher percentage on their credit card. The thought is bulk pricing gets a lower rate. And there's consistently more money going through a Costco. But they're helped and subsidized in every way. They might pay sub 1% for a charge, where a small business could be 3.5, 4.5% for a charge, driving people away from small businesses. It just doesn't make sense anymore. And sadly, when we talk about the fabric of this country, it isn't the Somalis. It's capitalism. The ability for you and I to open a business, start out of the trunk of our car, like MC Hammer, peddling his, what were they, cassettes at the time? Or what about the number of individuals who wanted to work for the US government as contractors and went to GSA, General Services Administration, and again, out of the trunk of their car, sold something to one of the inspectors? This sounds shady, but that's how business started. They would get one small contract and get a chance and grow it from there and build a great business based on integrity and the freedom to do so. Now that's almost impossible. Just to start a business in California costs $800 a year. That's just the tax to California to have a right to operate here. What about all the other taxes that are due? It just becomes overwhelming for small businesses to survive all the overhead. By the time they want to sell something that they love and they're passionate about and bring it to the world, as they have seen something that makes them happy or a need that they could fill for somebody else, they're realizing it just doesn't make sense monetarily. You know, this is one of the huge challenges I have with companies like Nextdoor. You used to be able to ask a neighbor, hey, I'm going to be gone next weekend. Do you mind pulling in my trash cans? Or if a neighbor was gone, you could run your lawnmower over their lawn and keep it fit until they came back. Let's say you needed to run to the store. You could tell a neighbor, my kid's in the house. Please just let me know if anything happens, and they'll come over, knock on your door if they need help. We don't do that anymore. We don't talk to our neighbors. And if you need help, it's almost expected that you use an app. You don't ask a parent or a friend to give you a ride to the airport anymore. You pay Uber or Lyft. Well, what happens when you're locked out? So I just posted a studio apartment on Nextdoor, and it was flagged and taken down. Well, that's not quite what happened. According to the response I got, they didn't think my name was real. My name's not generic. I asked if it was racism. My name is who I am. When Nextdoor started, they sent postcards out to every address. Once you asked to be part of it, they would send that postcard out. If you got the postcard, you had a code, you put in the code. That proved who you were and what address you lived at. Now, all of a sudden, somebody has said that my name probably isn't my name, which really has nothing to do with my name. Somebody's just flagging accounts because the post that I put had nothing other than unit will be available in January and a couple pictures of the unit. There was certainly nothing discriminatory or limiting about it because I was going to update it with more details later. That wasn't there. And yet now I lost my privilege to use the platform because somebody else complained. Now, this was really what we faced all through COVID. I couldn't rent any of my units. Every time I went to Craigslist or Nextdoor or Zillow or any of these, they kept being flagged. And when you're in your own home, you don't know what the problem is. You don't know what you're facing. And if you have the privilege of reaching any of these companies, and luckily the headquarters are almost all here for me, they'll lie to you or say they can't help you or what are you doing on our property? They're not about the consumer. They're certainly not about solving a problem for you. And what I found out is a company moved forward and placed an app at all the different universities. There's quite a few colleges and universities in my area. And what this app did is it told all students if they wanted to find student housing, they had to go through this particular tool. And it's charged the students to go through the tool. So what happened is anybody using any other method, like Craigslist or Nextdoor or Zillow or any of these, kept getting flagged because somebody in that company was paying a group of individuals to flag all other posts that we didn't know why or how, but we had to somehow figure out to use their platform or not rent rooms at all or units or apartments. And this came up on a mass scale as apartment buildings started asking what was going on. Why the pay to play? Because somebody stuck in with their great idea of how to suck money away from you, not to actually provide a service. So 20 to 25 really caused a lot of stress and PTSD as people lost their jobs, struggled to keep their jobs. Now, looking forward, we want to see what else can we do? How can we survive? You know, there's one other thing I want to talk about here. Let me see if I can find this particular link here. Let's see. See, there's a particular company. Oh, here it is. Okay, let me share this screen right here. Let's get this shared and then I'll go through the numbers with you. I like having that freedom in the background. Excited to get it cleaned up and dusted off. Go. Okay, so why are we having I don't like to click on any of these now, but this one too. Okay, so My Visa Jobs is a site that you can check. So during the changes, we could see that people were different. And once I was on campus, I could tell that these individuals were not from here. That doesn't mean that they can't do the job. But in order to bring somebody in this country under an H-1B visa, you have to prove that you've posted the job locally and then nobody else could do the job. And now you're hiring a specialist. All three of those were not the case. So I wanted to, let's see if, here we go. Here's the number. They have been changed. Green cards and H-1B visas. This is interesting. I do have screenshots here that I'll have to bring up for the classes. But as we see, as we were locked down in 2021, we had to stay in our homes, but 720 H-1B applications were for a company that couldn't have anybody on campus. And there had been 0 withdrawn. That's an adjustment. 2022, 836. Only 1 denied. 2023, 575. 2024, 543. Now, and then these are green card holders. These individuals go through a different process. How about what we have here? Total approved. 2025, 919. Do you know that in 2024, they laid off 1,900 employees because they were moving towards AI? And yet my background is in AI. And any of us who had AI experience, 1,800 here. It didn't matter because what they were doing was replacing the American workforce. Here, this was 2024, a tax preparation company, Intuit, laid off 1,800 as part of an AI-focused reorganization plan. And here it says the primarily locations are Mountain View. This won't seem to close. Mountain View, Boise, Idaho, and here it says Alberta, Canada. I also know San Diego was affected very heavily. So as we're moving towards 2026 and looking for opportunities, I showed this one yesterday. This is not the opportunity you want. As you can see from the URL, this is Builds and Buys, Somalia Real Estate Investment Guide. I'm telling you, no bridges here. You can tell this is 100% AI created. The whole site was probably created by a Lovable. I don't know any area in Somalia that would look like this. In all fairness, I haven't been there in recent years or ever. But this is what you can do for yourself, is invest in this loving country. Or you can build your own. Start from the ground up, create your own legacy. Find that door to freedom that I'm talking about, not the door marked security, but take the reins and grow with it. Now, what are we up against? Anytime we step out and ask questions, we're hit hard. Nick Shirley has now openly stated that he's getting a number of threats to unalive him. So is his family, who isn't even involved. They're going after people hard that are asking about the fraud, because fraud pays. And if you're willing to lie, cheat, or steal, what's one more step to unalive somebody? They've gotten away with this forever, and not just this group, but the governor of this state has, the governor of my state has. Why don't we start at the top and work our way down with the rest? If there's no penalty, people will continue. Now, this individual asked questions. And more so, he sat and listened. And he openly stated the threats that were coming to him. Now, as we move forward, I'll share a little bit more about my time in the federal government, but I will let you know, as Mitch Snow came forward, gang stalking is a real thing. It's pretty scary what this country has done to us. Okay. Not sure where we're at now. Oh, so YouTube chat. What I was looking at historically, how many YouTubers lost their websites? The ones that were asking questions in the various categories. Remember, at one point there were 100,000 people at a time who lost their channel. Here's even Nick Fuentes. All these individuals, because they were asking questions in a direction that we didn't want to, our government didn't want knowledge of, they lost their business, their ability to do commerce. But it wasn't just there. Remember all of the CEOs that stepped down? Let me see if that one's here. The 37 most dramatic CEO exits in 2019, a record-breaking year for executive departures. Remember the period of all the CEOs that were stepping down one after another? And here it even says in 2019, 1,160 CEOs left their positions, according to a staffing firm. The other time that we saw that was 2008, when 1,132 CEO departures. They know which way the wind is blowing. We just didn't know how big the storm was going to be. What about the PayPal user agreement? Do you remember when PayPal's misinformation fine sparked backlash? Remember, if PayPal saw that you posted something on a social media platform that, by the way, PayPal doesn't own, but if they picked up the fact that you posted something that was against the narrative, then you were not only banned from PayPal, but I think it was a $2,000 fine. Where do they have a right as a public company to do such overreach? And I don't know anybody who received those fines. I don't know what level of lawsuits would be coming for that. But that is just insane that became their updated terms of service. Now, what about geofencing? We've learned a lot about geofencing. We also learned about the FBI that used the Uber in San Francisco and found out that they were being tracked all the way into the location that they went long after they got out of the vehicle. This article was 2022. And we can't count on Congress. This is not where your saving grace is going to be. Now, for a lot of people, they just shoveled out the money for foreigners on our soil, for people who learn to scam the system, foreign or domestic. And as we talked about 2 days ago, independent journalists that are not so independent. The Mockingbird Press that has been launched is against you, not for you. And that government education camp or government indoctrination camp called a school that your children go to, it's very scary what's being presented. This is not where our solution is coming from. Because just like as I pointed out with the YouTubers, the threats are real. And when you rise to the level of Congress where you're making decisions, it's similar to the fate of the woman in Minnesota who came out crying after a vote whether or not to give illegals health care in Minnesota. She was the only dissenting vote, and she was crying. She said that she wanted to help everybody, but there just wasn't enough funds to do it. And 5 days later, she and her husband were no longer here. The threats and attack, asking questions are real. So I want to come back here to even a foundation. And for any of you that are going to do a Bible in 2 years, if you're going to use the YouVision, it doesn't go retroactive. So make sure you pull it up tomorrow and get that started so that it'll run with you for the next 365 days this year, and then of course on to the next year. But I wanted to really look at a grounding. Right now, God is being challenged. The Bible is being challenged. The land is being challenged. And yet, if we look here, the Bible emphasizes the importance of self-mastery and personal responsibility in achieving mastery over one's life. Key verses are Galatians 5:22-23. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, and patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. These highlights the importance of self-control as a divine attribute that reflects mastery over one's desires and impulses. How about 1 Corinthians 9:25-27? And every man that striveth for mastery is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a corruptible crown, but we are incorruptible. This verse suggests that true mastery is about spiritual rather than material goals. How are you going to set yourself up so you can enjoy freedom and stand up for things that are important to you, like the Word, like the Constitution, and like God? And of course, Proverbs 16:32. He who is slow to anger is better than a warrior, and he who controls his temper is greater than one who captures a city. This proverb equates mastery with wisdom and understanding, suggesting that true strength lies in the ability to govern one's emotions. These verses collectively illustrate that life mastery is indeed up to you, as it involves self-discipline, spiritual maturity, and aligning one's actions with God's will. Now, I had a pastor who shared with me, you've got to raise your eyes and move with your feet. You've got to do the work. And this is where we've been slacking. So as we move on in to this next year, I want once again for us to prepare. Now's the time to shake off the PTSD, shake off the anxiety, shake off the crap that we've gone through over the last 5 years. No, the world didn't open up and we didn't return to a point of being normal. We're still very much trying to survive in this world, and we've got a long ways to go. But we're only going to get there with individuals taking leadership roles. Now, I will guarantee over the next 5 years, we're going to see a rise of the robots. Concepts like iRobot. We're going to discuss this quite a bit tomorrow. But the idea is, this is a human world. This planet was built for you and I. Man creating something bigger than ourselves isn't allowed. It doesn't happen. We know that there's a war of good and evil. But the only way that you can continue to move forward is to not choose the security that is like quicksand under our feet, but to choose freedom. And as we reach out in 2026, we can happily move forward and find freedom once again. Come together as friends and family and create the world that we all envision for ourselves and our children. 2026, here we come.